Some stories don't start with screams or chaos. They begin with stillness, the kind that feels wrong. In the heart of Yangon, behind the door of a hotel room, that stillness was hiding something unthinkable. What happened inside would shake a nation and leave behind questions that may never be fully answered. This is the story of Madwin, a 23-year-old woman whose life was stolen in the most brutal and deliberate way imaginable. October 6, 2025, a Sunday morning in Yangon, Myanmar. The streets were already buzzing with life, motorbikes weaving through traffic, street vendors calling out their goods. The familiar rhythm of a city waking up. Just another ordinary day in Myanmar's largest city. But on the fifth floor of the modest Beautyland Hotel, something was very, very wrong that day. Room 502. From the outside, it looked like any other hotel room, a seemingly ordinary space where travelers come and go, where nothing remarkable ever happens. But that morning, something caught the attention of neighbors and passersby on the street below. Protruding from between two outdoor air conditioning units on the fifth floor was a blue plastic garbage bag. It was positioned on a narrow platform outside room 502's window, visible from the street, exposed to anyone who happened to look up at the building. The bag wasn't tucked away or hidden. It was hanging there, bulky and oddly shaped, impossible to miss. Residents of Pabitan Township walking past that morning noticed it immediately. Something about it looked wrong. The bag was stretched stiff around something large inside, and according to some accounts, what made people stop and stare was even more disturbing. What appeared to be a human arm protruding from the bag. At around the same time, hotel staff conducting their morning rounds also spotted the suspicious bag on the exterior ledge. Whether they noticed it independently or because of the commotion building on the street below, they too realized something was terribly wrong. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. People gathered outside, looking up, pointing. Inside the hotel, staff were making urgent phone calls. Multiple calls flooded into the police, from concerned residents and from the hotel itself. At around 10:20 a.m., officers from Pabitan Township Police Station arrived at the scene. Within minutes, the Criminal Investigation Department had been called in. The fifth floor was secured, the area cordoned off. Everyone kept back as investigators prepared for what they were about to find. When they reached that narrow platform between the air conditioning units and carefully examined the blue bag, their worst fears were confirmed. Inside was the body of a young woman. And what they were looking at was one of the most disturbing crime scenes Yangon had seen in years. When investigators carefully opened that blue garbage bag, the full horror became immediately clear. The victim had suffered multiple deep stab wounds. Her clothes were completely soaked with blood. But it wasn't just the stabbing that made seasoned officers step back in shock. There was something different. Parts of her internal organs had been deliberately removed. Flesh from her left thigh had been cut away with precision. This wasn't the work of someone in a rage. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was carefully planned. The kind of violence that suggests someone was acting out something they'd seen or imagined. The placement of the bag itself told a story. Someone had tried to hide the body, positioning it on that narrow ledge where it might go unnoticed for a while, but not for too long. But a faint smell had already begun to drift through the air, drawing attention. Inside room 502, the evidence painted a grim picture. Blood streaks marked the floor and walls, suggesting there had been a struggle, or at least movement during the attack. Drag marks led from inside the room toward the balcony, indicating the victim may have been pulled or carried before being placed in the bag. The forensic team worked carefully, photographing every surface, collecting samples, documenting patterns. They found evidence that someone had attempted some cleanup. There were marks near the bathroom drain, signs that water had been used to wash away the blood. But the sheer amount of blood made it impossible to hide what had happened. And what struck investigators most was the deliberate nature of it all. The violence, the mutilation, every detail pointed to premeditation. And someone had maybe even practiced it in their mind. But who was she, and who could do something like this? Within hours, investigators had an answer to the first question. The victim's identity was confirmed through her belongings and digital records. Her name was Madwin. She was just 23 years old. She came from Nadalin Township in the Bago region, a small rural area where life moves at a different pace than in Yangon. Her family was private and reserved, but they were known in their community as supportive and caring people. They'd raised their daughter with love and hope for her future. Friends who knew Madwin remembered her as bright and determined, someone who had dreams bigger than her small hometown could contain. She was full of potential, full of life. And like so many young women from rural Myanmar, she'd made the journey to Yangon seeking opportunity and independence. She wanted to build something for herself in that busy, sprawling city. Her circumstances were humble, but her future had seemed full of possibility until someone took all of that away in the most brutal way imaginable. Those who knew her still speak of her gentle nature. They speak of a young woman who deserved so much more than what happened to her in room 502. When the victim identified, investigators turned their full attention to finding who did this. The clock was ticking. Hotel staff were questioned immediately. Some insisted they hadn't noticed anything unusual that night or the following morning. Others, when pressed, recalled seeing a young man and a woman entering room 502 the night before the body was discovered. They'd seemed like any other couple checking in. Nothing stood out at the time. The hotel's CCTV footage was limited, but what existed proved crucial. The cameras shown Madwin, the victim, entering the hotel with a young man on the evening of October 5th. They appeared like any normal couple checking in, nothing suspicious at all. Later footage captured a young woman arriving alone at the hotel after the murder had already occurred. And crucially, there was no footage of Madwin ever leaving that hotel alive. These two people on camera would later be identified as the suspects. But the real breakthrough came from digital evidence. Investigators examined Madwin's phone and reviewed her recent communications. What they found was chilling. The victim had been contacted through a Telegram channel known as Leader. The messages revealed that she'd agreed to meet someone at the hotel. There, a man reached out to her offering payment for what he described as entertainment or companionship, terms often used to refer to escort services or paid social companionship in these types of arrangements. This wasn't a random encounter. He'd chosen his victim, made contact through a channel that provided anonymity, and lured her to a specific location where he could carry out what he'd been planning. The digital trail led investigators straight to their prime suspect, and authorities moved quickly. October 7th, 2025, just over 24 hours after the body was discovered, police executed coordinated raids in 2 different townships across Yangon. Shockingly, the suspects turned out to be teenagers. In Taketa Township, officers surrounded a residence and arrested 18-year-old Aung Khan Jazin, the guy from the CCTV footage. Simultaneously, another team moved on a location in Bahan Township and took his girlfriend, who was also there, 18-year-old Mai Monao, into custody. Neither put up resistance. The evidence recovered from these locations was damning. At Aung Khan Jazin's residence, officers found clothing stained with blood that would later match Madwin's DNA. They found the murder weapons, 2 steel knives, the blades still bearing traces of the victim's blood. They found 3 mobile phones, including one that belonged to Madwin herself. Both teenagers were brought in for questioning. And what came out during those interrogations would reveal something deeply disturbing about what had driven this horrific act. Aung Khan didn't deny anything. In fact, he walked investigators through the entire crime, step by step, with a disturbing level of detail. He told them about his obsession. For months, maybe longer, he'd been consumed by violent video games and foreign television series, shows that depicted murder, dismemberment, body disposal, and graphic detail. He'd watched them constantly, studying the techniques, the methods, the way fictional killers operated. He'd become fixated on these images. They'd start to blur with reality in his mind. At some point, watching wasn't enough anymore. He wanted to experience it. He wanted to know what it felt like to take a life, to cut into a body, to dispose of remains. The shows made it look possible. They made it look achievable. On October 5th, he reached out to Madwin through the Leader Telegram channel. He posed as a regular client, someone looking for paid entertainment. He offered money, and she agreed to meet him at the Beautyland Hotel the following evening. She had absolutely no idea what was waiting for her in room 502. Once they were alone in the room, Aung Khan immediately attacked. He didn't even wait. He used the 2 steel knives he'd brought with him, tools he'd prepared in advance, knowing exactly what he planned to do. The stabbing was brutal and repeated, multiple deep wounds. He didn't stop there. Just like the shows he'd watched, he began cutting. He removed parts of her internal organs. He cut flesh from her left thigh. He was imitating, scene by scene, the violence he'd consumed through his screen. This was the moment where fiction became his reality, where the boundary between entertainment and actual murder disappeared completely. After Madwin was dead, Aung Khan called his girlfriend, Mai Monao, came to the hotel, arriving after the murder had been already committed. Together, they tried to clean up the scene. They wiped down surfaces. They attempted to wash blood from the bathroom. They wrapped Madwin's body in that blue plastic garbage bag and carried it to the balcony, placing it on the ledge between the 2 air conditioning units. They thought they could hide it, or maybe they didn't even really care. The confession was detailed and chilling. Aung Khan showed no real remorse during questioning, just a matter-of-fact recounting of what he'd done, as if he were describing a video game level he'd completed. So who were these 2 teenagers? How does someone so young commit such an unthinkable act? Aung Khan, just 18 years old, was described by friends and neighbors as quiet, reserved, withdrawn. He was the kind of young man who blended into the background. He didn't cause trouble, and he didn't stand out. People who knew him had no idea what was happening inside his head. The police investigations found evidence of his deep fixation on violent foreign TV series and online games depicting murder, dismemberment, and body disposal. His browsing history, his online activity, his viewing habits all pointed to someone who'd become obsessed with death and violence. And now it's important to understand something. Millions of people play violent video games and watch crime shows without ever committing violence. The research on this is actually divided. Some studies suggest a correlation between violent media and increased aggression, while others find no meaningful link to real-world criminal behavior. And most experts agree that media violence alone doesn't create killers. So what made this case different? What made Aung Khan cross that line from consumer to perpetrator? The answer likely lies in the combination of factors that created a perfect storm. There were signs that he struggled with mental health issues. Reports suggest possible substance use, though investigators were still examining the full extent. Friends mentioned he'd become increasingly isolated in recent months, spending most of his time alone, gaming, watching shows, disconnecting from the real world. But isolation and media consumption alone don't explain what happened. The way he carried out the murder with such precision, such deliberate mimicry of what he'd seen on screen suggested something deeper, a complete inability to distinguish fantasy from reality, a breakdown in empathy, possibly an underlying psychological disorder that went undiagnosed and untreated. His behavior before the crime appeared completely normal to outsiders. He maintained a facade of ordinariness. But beneath that surface, something was fundamentally broken. Whether the violent media fed that brokenness or simply provided him with a template for expressing something that was already there, that's a question even experts can definitively answer. Maimon Aung, also 18 years old and from Bahan Township, was his girlfriend and accomplice. Her role was smaller but significant. She participated in the cover-up, making her complicit in the crime. Her involvement raised difficult questions. Was she coerced? Was she under the influence of her boyfriend? Was she afraid of him? Or was she a willing participant, someone who'd been shaped by the same violent media, the same desensitization to violence? Like Aung Khan-joseon, she reportedly shared an interest in crime media and violent video games. Whether that influenced her willingness to help conceal a murder, to touch a dead body, to clean blood from a hotel room, to participate in hiding evidence remains part of the ongoing legal examination. While little is publicly known about her personal life before this crime, she represents something troubling about peer influence, about the decisions young people make under the sway of relationships, about how loyalty or fear can lead someone to cross lines they might never have crossed on their own. Both of them were barely adults. Both of them made choices that destroyed lives. The victims, their own, their families. And both of them would now face the full weight of Myanmar's justice system. As the investigation deepened, the Leader Telegram channel became more than just a piece of evidence. It became a symbol of a larger problem. Telegram has grown into one of the most popular platforms in Myanmar, especially since the military coup in 2021. Its light approach to content moderation and strong protections for user anonymity made it incredibly appealing to people who want private communication. But those same features make it a haven for criminal activity. The Leader channel, according to investigators, appeared to operate in a gray area. It reportedly facilitated meetings related to companionship or other paid services, the kind of arrangement that exists in a legal and ethical gray zone. Like many secretive online groups, it operated with minimal oversight and virtually no accountability. The anonymity it provided was crucial to Aung Khan-joseon's plan. It allowed him to approach Madwin without revealing his true identity or intentions. It gave him the ability to screen potential targets, to make arrangements to lure someone to a specific location, all while leaving minimal digital footprints. But the problem extends far beyond one Telegram channel or one murder case. Since the 2021 coup, Telegram channels and private groups across Southeast Asia, and especially in Myanmar, have been increasingly exploited by underground criminal networks. The United Nations and various NGOs have issued warnings that this platform is frequently used by criminal gangs for scams, exploitation, and sex trafficking. Many channels that clearly enable illegal activity or harassment are rarely removed by Telegram's administrators. They continue operating unchecked, month after month, year after year, facilitating harm. In Myanmar specifically, Telegram has been linked to doxing campaigns, where personal information of women, including activists and critics of the military regime, is exposed publicly to threaten or intimidate them. Some public channels openly coordinate group harassment or target users with misogynistic content, causing documented harm that extends from online threats to real-world violence. Back to the story, the Leader channel may not have been explicitly created for criminal purposes, but it provided the infrastructure that made this crime possible. Investigators believe it served as the initial point of contact between Aung Khan and Madwin, a digital meeting place that offered both anonymity and access. While no official evidence currently links Leader to other violent crimes, police and digital rights researchers warn that these kinds of channels are inherently risky. They operate in shadows. They can be shut down and recreated with new names within hours. And they are nearly impossible to regulate effectively. The Beautyland Hotel case has renewed urgent calls from civil society organizations for greater transparency, better content moderation, and stricter regulation of platforms like Telegram in Myanmar. But whether those calls will lead to actual change remains an open question. Officials made public statements assuring citizens that both suspects would face the full force of justice. Legal proceedings are ongoing in the Yangon Regional Court. Both Aung Khan and Mai Mun Aung face charges under Section 302 of Myanmar's Penal Code. And the trial's outcome may set important precedents for how similar cases involving youth, violent media influence, and digital platform exploitation are handled in Myanmar's legal system. The investigation has been recognized as one of the most comprehensive murder inquiries in recent Yangon history, with forensic evidence, digital tracking, and psychological assessment all playing crucial roles in building the prosecution's case. The murder of 23-year-old Madwin shocked Myanmar. Outrage spread across social media as people struggled to understand how two 18-year-olds could plan such violence. And that question led to wider debates about what shapes young minds today. Investigators revealed one perpetrator's obsession with violent media, prompting fierce arguments over whether movies, shows, and games can desensitize youth, or whether the real issue is the lack of guidance and mental health support to help them separate fiction from reality. The case also exposed the country's fragile safety nets, Myanmar's limited mental health care, the cultural stigma around counseling, and the failure of hotel security that led teenagers in, allowing the crime to go unnoticed until morning. The Beautyland Hotel on 32nd Street was closed following this discovery. Its doors shut as investigators worked and as the community tried to process what had happened there. Yet beneath these systemic flaws lies the human loss. Remembering her means seeing more than the horror. It means confronting the society that failed to protect her, questioning how we raise, guide, and safeguard our youth, and finding the empathy and resolve to prevent such tragedies from happening again. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.